My wife and her boss, who's 20 years her senior, secretly divided our $400, $0 inheritance to buy a house, and then she forged my signature to take out a $200, $0 loan. Now she's suing me for reconciliation costs, while I just found out her affair was with her divorce lawyer. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, it feels like some twisted plot from a bad soap opera, but it's real life, my life. The most unexpected moment hit me out of nowhere. I was just scrolling through our bank accounts, trying to make sense of the mess after all the recent chaos, when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There, in black and white, was a $200, $0 loan taken out using my signature, a signature I never authorized. That's when everything started to unravel. My wife had always been the kind of woman who could turn on the charm and make you believe she was the most innocent person in the world. But lately, I'd been noticing small things. She'd come home late, her phone was always hidden, and she'd get defensive if I asked questions. Still, I convinced myself she was just busy with work or stressed out. She's a marketing executive, always traveling, always working late. But that bank statement changed everything. I'd been suspicious for a while, but this was concrete proof she'd forged my signature to get a loan, a huge one, and I had no idea what she was doing with that money. It was a Saturday when I finally decided to confront her. I'd been stewing over it for days, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. I found her in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, looking as cool and bitchy as ever. I laid the papers on the table and pointed at the loan document. Her face instantly stiffened, and she looked at me like I was an idiot for even bringing it up. "What the hell is this? Did you take out a loan using my name? I never approved this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but inside I was furious. She rolled her eyes and smirked. "Oh, come on, Jack, it's just a loan. We needed it for the house." "You're overreacting. It's not a big deal." I stared at her, feeling my blood boil. "A big deal? You forged my signature to steal money and you're calling it not a big deal. What the hell are you doing with that money?" She scoffed and leaned back. "It's none of your business. You're just being paranoid. Besides, I've been working my ass off these last few months and you're accusing me of cheating, stealing, everything. You really think I'd do something that stupid?" That's when I saw the cracks in her story. Her eyes darted around and she was avoiding eye contact. I knew she was lying. I could tell she'd been hiding something, and not just the loan. The way she's been acting lately, secretive, defensive, hostile even, it all clicked into place. Then I remembered something I'd overheard a few weeks ago. She'd been talking to her boss, a guy named Mark, a much older guy, like 20 years her senior. They'd been working closely, and I'd caught her laughing on the phone when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd brushed it off at the time, but now I wasn't so sure. Something about that situation felt wrong, especially with the timing of the loan and her recent attitude. I pressed her further. "Who is Mark? What's going on with him?" She looked annoyed now, her bitchy side coming out. "It's none of your business. He's my boss, Jack. We're just working together, that's all. You're just jealous because he's successful and I'm doing well. You're insecure, that's all." I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes. She's always been good at spinning stories, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and helplessness. How could she do this? How could she forge my signature, take out a loan, and lie about her relationship with her boss? All I wanted was honesty, and all I got was a liar and a cheat. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the way she lied so easily, the way she dismissed everything I said. I felt like I didn't even know her anymore. I kept thinking about the inheritance we got, the $400, $0 that we'd inherited from my parents. We agreed to buy a house, build a future, but she'd used that money to buy herself some kind of secret life. And the loan, that was just the tip of the iceberg. I started digging through our financial records, trying to find out what else she'd been hiding. That's when I stumbled upon more surprises. There were transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, payments for things I'd never heard of. Meanwhile, she was still insisting she was innocent, that I was overreacting, that she loved me. But her actions told a different story, a story of betrayal, greed, and deception. I felt sick. I felt betrayed on every level. And I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, respect, and the life I thought I had. She'd been lying to my face for months, maybe longer. I didn't know how to process it all, the fact that the woman I'd loved, the woman I married, had been secretly screwing her boss, planning her escape, maybe even planning to leave me with nothing. I had to decide what to do next, but right now, I was just trying to breathe, trying to keep it together. Because the truth was, I was hurt worse than I'd ever been in my life, and I knew that whatever came next, nothing would be the same again. After that confrontation, I couldn't focus on anything else. My mind kept circling around the same questions. How long had she been planning this? Was I blind to all the signs? And most of all, how could she lie so effortlessly, especially about something so big? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to get to the bottom of everything, no matter how painful it was going to be. The next morning, I started digging into her phone and emails. I knew I wasn't supposed to invade her privacy, but I felt like I had no choice. I needed proof, concrete proof of what she was hiding. It wasn't long before I found what I was looking for. Hidden in a folder marked work stuff was a series of emails between her and Mark, her boss. The emails were flirty, suggestive even, talking about secret meetings, late nights, and personal conversations that clearly crossed professional boundaries. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling my stomach turn. She'd been lying about her relationship. With him, too, not just an innocent boss-employee thing. No, this was something much deeper. And the worst part, she'd been doing it behind my back secretly. All those nights she claimed she was working late, she was probably with him. I could picture her sneaking out, meeting him in some hotel or his apartment. It all made me sick. I also found text messages, explicit ones, where she was clearly seeking out sex with him, describing what she wanted to do, how she wanted to be wild with him. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My wife, the woman I loved and trusted, was cheating on me with her boss and they were having sex. That's when it hit me hard. This wasn't just an affair, it was a full-blown betrayal, a carefully planned double life. I felt anger rising, hotter than anything I'd ever experienced. How dare she do this? How dare she lie, forge my signature, steal money, and then have sex with her boss? I was furious, but beneath that fury was a deep, aching sadness. I realized I'd lost her, not just as a wife, but as the person I thought I knew. All the moments we shared, the promises, the plans for our future shattered in an instant. I knew I needed to confront her again, but this time I wanted to do it with everything I'd uncovered. I waited until she came home that evening, trying to keep my composure. She walked in looking smug, like she thought she'd gotten away with everything. That's when I told her I knew about the emails, the texts, everything. Her reaction was classic. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and tried to dismiss it all. "Jack, you're crazy. You're just jealous. This is all just work stuff, nothing more. You're overreacting because you're insecure." But I wasn't buying it. I showed her the messages on my phone, the explicit texts, the email timestamps. Her face paled and her bitchy attitude faded into something more defensive. She tried to lie her way out, claiming she and Mark were just friends, that he was helping her with work. But I knew better. I'd seen enough. The truth was, she was cheating on me with her boss and she'd been lying about everything. The money, the affair, the forged signature, it all clicked into place. At that moment, I felt like I was drowning. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted her? I'd given her everything, my love, my inheritance, my life. And she'd taken it all and thrown it away for some affair with a much older man. The betrayal cut deep, and I knew I wouldn't forgive her easily. I told her I'd been through her phone, her emails, and I knew the truth. She looked at me with that same bitchy smirk, trying to act like she was innocent, like I was overreacting. But I could see through her lies now. She was caught and she knew it. Her whole facade was cracking. That night I didn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, the lies, the betrayal, the sex with her boss. It was like a punch to the gut every time. I felt numb but also furious. I'd always thought I was a good husband, the one who provided and protected her. And now I realized I'd been played for a fool. I had to decide what to do next. I knew I couldn't stay in this marriage, not after everything I'd uncovered, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. She stolen a lot of money, forged my signature, and was deep into this affair. I couldn't just walk away without consequences. I needed to gather more evidence, maybe even talk to a lawyer. For now, I decided to keep quiet about what I knew. I wanted to see her reaction, see if she slipped up again. But I was already planning my next move. This wasn't just about cheating. It was about betrayal on a scale I never imagined possible. And I knew, deep down, that I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with it all. The days that followed were a blur of planning and trying to keep my composure. I couldn't let her see how much she'd broken me, not yet. Instead, I played it cool, pretending everything was normal while secretly gathering every piece of evidence I could find. My mind was racing with questions. How deep did her lies go? Was she planning to leave me? Or worse, was she planning to take everything and run? I started talking to a lawyer just to get a sense of my options. It was clear she'd forged my signature on that loan, which is a serious crime. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd been living in a nightmare. She'd secretly divided our inheritance with her boss, Mark, to buy a house. I had no idea she'd been planning that. Meanwhile, she was also screwing him, having sex with him behind my back. It was like everything I believed in was crumbling. One thing that kept gnawing at me was her attitude. She acted like she was the victim, like I was overreacting. That bitchy smirk she always wore when she was lying, dismissing my concerns as paranoia. But I'd seen through her. I knew her secrets now, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I decided to follow her one evening. I needed to see where she went when she said she was working late. I parked a few blocks away from her office building and watched her slip into a fancy restaurant with Mark. They looked comfortable, familiar even. They weren't just colleagues, they were lovers. I saw her lean in close, whispering, laughing. They shared a kiss before she got into his car. That moment hit me like a punch to the stomach. I'd suspected it, but seeing it in person made it real. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was deep into this affair, and she didn't care about how much she'd hurt me. The betrayal was worse than I thought. I felt a wave of anger and sadness. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face, steal my money, and then go off with her boss like I was nothing? I wanted to confront her then and there, but I knew I had to be smarter. I had to gather everything I needed to expose her fully. I couldn't just blow up the marriage without a plan. Back home, I started digging into her finances more. I found accounts I didn't recognize, payments for hotels, dinners, gifts. She'd been spending the stolen inheritance and the loan money on her secret life. It was sickening to see how she'd taken everything I worked for and used it to cheat on me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every detail, her sneaking out, the secret texts, the emails, the sex with Mark. I felt humiliated and furious. How could I have been so blind? How could she be so callous? I'd given her everything, my love, my trust, the inheritance, and she'd thrown it all away for a quick affair. I knew I had to act soon. I couldn't let her keep lying, cheating, and stealing. I needed to confront her again, but this time armed with proof. I decided to wait until I had everything in hand before making my next move. I wanted her to see I wasn't going to be played anymore. Meanwhile, I also reached out to a private investigator. I needed someone to follow her more discreetly, gather footage, and maybe even find out what she was doing with Mark when I wasn't around. I was determined to get to the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. What really stung was realizing how much I'd trusted her. I'd always thought we were solid, building a future together. But she was secretly planning her escape, using my inheritance, forging my signature, and screwing her boss behind my back. It made me question everything, the vows we took, the life I thought we shared. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking maybe she'd change, maybe she'd realize she'd gone too far. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. The evidence was piling up, and I'd be damned if I let her keep hurting me. I had to protect myself, my money, and whatever dignity I could salvage from this mess. The betrayal was profound, and I knew I'd never see her the same way again. The investigation took a turn I didn't expect. The private investigator I hired came back with footage, clear, undeniable proof of her meetings with Mark. They weren't just sneaking around for a quick affair. It was more like they were planning something bigger. I saw her entering his apartment late at night, staying for hours, sometimes leaving in the early morning. There was even footage of them in a hotel, kissing and holding hands. The worst part, she was doing all of this while claiming she was working late or at a conference. Seeing that video was like getting punched again. It confirmed everything I'd already suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. My wife was cheating on me with her boss, and they'd been doing it for months. It was so much worse than I thought. I'd been living in a bubble, trusting her, thinking we were building a future, while she was secretly screwing someone else and stealing from us at the same time. I remember sitting there, staring at the footage, feeling numb. My mind raced with questions. How long had she been cheating? Had she been planning to leave me? Was the whole thing about the inheritance, the $400, $0 we inherited from my parents, just a way for her to fund her escape? It all started to make sense in a sick, twisted way. She divided the money with Mark to buy a house, and now she was using the loan to cover her tracks, to keep her secret life hidden. The emotional toll was overwhelming. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I'd always thought I was a good husband, worked hard, provided for her, loved her. But she'd been lying to my face, planning her exit and screwing her boss behind my back. The thought that she'd been having sex with Mark, that she'd been using my inheritance as her personal bankroll, made me feel sick. I was furious that she'd stolen from me, lied to me, and then had the nerve to act like I was the crazy one when I confronted her. I knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I had enough evidence to blow the whole thing open. I decided I'd confront her again, but this time with everything in my arsenal. I set up a meeting at our house, knowing she'd come expecting to spin her usual lies. I wanted her to see I wasn't playing around anymore. When she arrived, she looked confident, that bitchy smirk plastered on her face. But I was calm, too calm maybe. I played the footage on my laptop, letting her see herself sneaking into Mark's apartment, kissing him, and leaving hotel rooms with her hair a mess, her makeup smudged, her face drained of color. She stammered, trying to deny it, tried to throw out more lies. "That's not what it looks like," she said, voice trembling slightly. But I cut her off. "It looks pretty damn clear to me. You're cheating, lying, forging my signature, and stealing from us all at once. How could you do this? How could you betray everything we built?" She tried her usual excuse about how Mark was just helping her with work, how it was innocent, how she didn't mean for any of this to happen. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. The evidence was too strong, and I knew she was lying to save herself. Her words sounded hollow, desperate even. The emotional impact was intense. I felt my chest tighten, a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I'd loved her, trusted her, and now I saw her for what she truly was: a liar, a cheat, a thief. I had to face the reality that our marriage was over. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when she was screwing her boss, lying about it, and stealing from me. That night I made the decision. I was done trying to save something that was already broken beyond repair. I told her she needed to leave, that I was filing for divorce, and that I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. She threw a tantrum, insisting she loved me, that she'd change, that it was all a mistake. But I knew better. Love doesn't include lying, cheating, forging signatures, and stealing $500,000. The aftermath was a whirlwind. I contacted my lawyer, started the divorce process, and worked on getting my money back. I also filed a police report about the forgery and theft. It was a long road ahead, but I felt a strange sense of relief, knowing I finally had the truth out in the open. Looking back, I realize I was blind for a long time. I trusted her blindly, and she took advantage of that. But I also learned a lot about myself, about the importance of paying attention, not ignoring warning signs, and standing up for what's right. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone in a similar situation, it's this: trust your gut, gather evidence, and don't be afraid to fight for your truth. Because if you don't, someone else will take everything from you: your money, your love, your dignity. The divorce process was brutal, but honestly, it was a relief to finally start separating myself from her chaos. I had to deal with lawyers, paperwork, and the emotional toll of realizing the woman I loved was capable of everything she'd done. The worst part was the financial mess she left behind. She drained our accounts, hidden money, and left me with a mountain of debt from the forged loan. I was furious knowing she'd used her position, her charm, and my trust to manipulate everything for her own benefit. During this time, I also discovered she'd been planning her escape for months. She opened new bank accounts, transferred money to offshore accounts, and even bought a second, secret house with Mark, all behind my back. It was like she'd been building her new life while I was clueless, working to keep our marriage afloat. The betrayal cut deep, but I was determined to get justice. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was fighting to reclaim my dignity. In the midst of all this chaos, I faced a lot of anger and sadness. I'd been by her lies, her sex with Mark, and her blatant theft. I felt humiliated that she'd been sneaking around, hiding her affair, and using me as a fool. Every time I thought about her, I'd get a sick feeling in my stomach. But I also knew I had to stay strong for myself, and for the little bit of peace I could find amid the storm. One thing that helped was focusing on rebuilding my life. I started going to therapy, talking through the betrayal, and working on forgiving myself for not seeing the signs earlier. I also made it a priority to cut her out of my life completely. I changed my phone number, blocked her on social media, and refused to let her manipulate me anymore. I realized that holding onto anger and pain was only hurting me. I had to let go, even if it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Eventually, I managed to settle most of the legal issues. I got a court order to freeze her accounts and recovered some of the stolen money. I also managed to get the forged loan invalidated, which was a huge relief. But even with all that, the emotional scars remained. I kept asking myself how I could missed all the signs, how I could trusted her so blindly. It was a painful lesson, but I was determined not to let it define me. Looking back, I realize I learned something invaluable. Trust is fragile, and people can surprise you in the worst ways. But I also learned that you can survive betrayal, even the deepest kind, if you stay true to yourself and fight for what's right. I'm still healing, still picking up the pieces, but I'm finally starting to feel like I have control again. And honestly, that's the biggest victory of all. I don't wish this pain on anyone, but if it happens, I hope they find the strength to stand up and fight back. Because no one deserves to be played for a fool, especially not by the person they loved. Now looking back, I realize how much I've learned from all of this about trust, betrayal, and the importance of paying attention. I used to think I had a strong marriage, but it turns out, even the strongest bonds can be broken if one person is willing to lie, cheat, and steal. The hardest part was accepting that the woman I loved and trusted was capable of such deception. It shook my core, but it also forced me to what I want from life and from the people around me. I've come to see that revenge in some ways was necessary, not in the petty sense of getting back at her, but in the sense of reclaiming my power and dignity. I wanted her to know I wasn't some naive fool who could be easily manipulated. I fought back not just with legal action, but by taking control of my own life. I cut her out completely, moved forward, and started rebuilding from scratch. That's the only way I could truly heal. For anyone going through something similar, my biggest advice is this: don't ignore the red flags. Trust your instincts and don't be afraid to confront uncomfortable truths. Gather evidence if you need to sometimes. It's the only way to see the full picture. And most importantly, don't stay in a toxic situation out of fear or hope that things will get better. Sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you can do. This experience has made me stronger, even if it's also made me more cautious. I still feel the sting of betrayal, but I refuse to let it define me. I've learned that no matter how deep the betrayal, you can come out the other side battered maybe, but also wiser. Life is too short to be with someone who doesn't value honesty, loyalty, and respect. Today, I'm focusing on myself, on healing, and on making sure I never let anyone manipulate or hurt me like that again. I may have lost her, but I've gained clarity and a renewed sense of self. I know now that I deserve better, and I won't settle for anything less. The road ahead isn't easy, but I'm finally moving forward, stronger, wiser, and more cautious. And honestly, that's the best revenge of all.